Geyser, however, promises to bring a new brand of attacking football to Halifax and made several signings this off-season with regard this off-season with an eye toward making this happen. And what is this bullshit? Halifax Wanderers 3, York... No, I wish. Halifax Wanderers 0, York United 3. Bottom of the table prior to this match, and now we are. This has to be a one-off. We have a massively different side. We have a new gaffer with ostensibly new ideas. I really hope it doesn't still lead to the same old problems in the long run, especially considering that we've had decent games against teams we couldn't lay a glove on last year. It's clear that Caligari, suspended on cards for this match, would be a big miss for this game, but I don't think anyone, players included, knew just how big. Night and day difference between having the pass lord on our side and not having them there. It worries me that our structure is still rumbled this hard when one player of any importance is missing. It was true last season with any one of JGL, Fernandez, or Rampersad, and you bet your ass it's true with the pass lord himself, Lorenzo Caligari. The one thing he seems to struggle with is clean tackles, and that means yellows. And that'll mean trouble every 5 or 6 games if he doesn't tighten up this one weakness among a ton of strengths. He can't be the only pressure valve, although it's great to have him as a pressure valve, since we will need a plan B for when that pressure valve is being pacified by other teams, as can happen to any notable player in this sport. We were scouted that day, and the last time a team scouted us that intensely prior to this was Halifax versus Forge last year, the first game, with a similar result. Predictability is dangerous. As far into the game as 38 minutes, Halifax had no shots of any kind, and York had 7, and 2 goals by then. It was an incredibly one-sided performance throughout the first half. Folks leaving early didn't surprise me. York had a fair few key players missing too, such as Babuli and Jeremy Gagnon-Lapere. JGL would have helped their midfield immensely, and I know this because he helped our midfield immensely before the off-season transfer. One thing that bothered me was there was a York player who clattered into Rampy, I believe that was Ricci who did that, to pick the ball up for leading to 0-2. That was serious enough that in my opinion it deserved a foul call. York scored almost right after halftime, that's 0-3, and it wasn't like the lads were still mentally in the dressing room, like sometimes happens. There was genuine attacking intent, with the big problem being driving too many folks forward. York capitalized off of this, intercepting a play on their end, and 30 seconds later they score on the other. Loffrey wasn't at all fast enough getting back after the Wanderers committed so many folks forward. Ferrazzo was running like hell to catch up, but Samaro bypassed him successfully en route to the goal despite his best efforts. Omar and Rampersad were struggling massively. Rampersad because of his relatively new role as a more central midfielder slightly further up as opposed to a 6. I'm confident Ramps will adjust to his role, aided further by Caligari's return in future matches. Omar was getting cooked and robbed of the ball constantly, and turnovers from him led to the first of the 3 goals. As harsh as it sounded, other than a few good headers and back half free kicks, Omar was where midfield play went to die. It was a good idea to sub him off at the half, but did Colombe have to go off with him? I disagree, but it seems like Geyser didn't think we had any way back into this game at the half, and the rest was about damage control. A big contrast between that and his stated intention of attacking football and risking conceding goals to score them. Ironically enough, we did play more proactively in that same half, where it seemed like Colombe could have contributed. Cozy and Tomas Giraldo came on, and I'd like to see what Giraldo does in future matches. Mercifully, we managed to stabilize the situation and keep it from becoming even more embarrassing, while running at York in an attempt to take some advantage of their reduced tempo and give the the home crowd something to cheer about. Nearly all of our shots on goal were in the second half, but none of them found purchase in the York net, the closest being a fair and wonder shot that spanged off the crossbar millimeters from going in. That one was one of the 2 shots that were on target, and that wouldn't have been enough. There are 12 shots total, by the way, that we made. Whereas York's one shot in the second half, out of 4 overall, was sufficient to score when they did. The defense was struggling all game as well, with Nimick earning a good, in large part because of how much he rescued them when he had the chance. Campagna was well below his usual, and I was relieved to see Ruby replace him at the 60-minute mark. Fernandez's strengths were mainly going forward rather than on the defensive end of things, and Ferrazzo on the left wasn't as good as Fern, but still had enough going forward to avoid a poor rating. There was one moment at the 75-minute mark where Cale Loffrey gave up on running during a play, and just before a goal kick, he was arguing with Jan Fillion about where he should be, shouting at him what to do. This helps nobody, and is a large part of why Loffrey has the rating shown in the lower left quadrant of this. Patrice Geyser was interviewed at a time when I bet my right leg on him being put on the spot without a chance to properly prepare a sensible response about Saturday's donkey show. He said something about the players being intimidated by the large crowd. Initially, I think I kind of read too much, or kind of like oversimplified my reading of it. That's right up, it still seems right up there with some of the stuff the last guy said. And while it could imply terrible things about the players and possibly some fans, and honestly, he might, to his credit, he could very, very likely have been saying that you don't know how a player is going to respond to pro-level play, even in a relatively low-tier soccer country such as Canada. I probably would have, at a minimum, worded it a bit better. But I'm not a coach. I'm not a gaffer. Maybe I'm talking out of my ass. On to Pacific away. Keep in mind that the best game we've ever had was last season, a season where good games were rare, at Starlight. Pacific 0, Halifax 3. I can't think of a better palate cleanser than to take all of that frustration, that embarrassment, that feeling of powerlessness coming from Saturday's debacle out on the victorious side. Come on, you Wanderers. Excellent. No, nobody. At all. Good. Fernandez and Nimick. Poor. Rampersad and Campagna. Crap. Loffrey and Omar. Here's hoping this is a one-off. That's all from me.